You start with the brutal math of the bottom. Networking is a volume game when you have no name. You scrape LinkedIn for every VP and managing director. You build a massive spreadsheet in your dark apartment. 1,200 names, 1,200 potential keys to a different life. You draft the perfect professional template. You spend 6 nights clicking send. Your fingers ache. Your eyes burn from the blue light. Monday morning arrives. Your inbox is a silent desert. Tuesday brings more of the same quiet. Silence is the loudest noise in Manhattan. You check your tracking software every 10 minutes. 900 emails were open, 0 emails were answered. In the predatory world of US finance, cold response rates hover around 0.3%. You are screaming into a void. You are fighting the noise of 10,000 other ghosts. You realize the system is designed to ignore you. Then, on a rainy Thursday, a notification finally pings. It is an associate at a mid-market private equity firm. He is one of only 4 people who replied. He has exactly 15 minutes for you. He suggests a Starbucks on 42nd Street in Midtown. You arrive 40 minutes early. You wait by the door. You buy his venti latte before he walks in. He arrives 12 minutes late. He doesn't even look at your resume. He looks directly at your eyes instead. He is looking for a specific kind of hunger. He's looking for someone who survives the grind. He tells you the first hard truth. Everyone in this city is smart. Very few people are actually reliable. You talk for exactly 12 minutes about market volatility. He doesn't offer you a job. He gives you a single name. Tell him I sent you, he says quietly. He leaves his half-finished coffee on the table. That is the first spark of the engine. 1 reply out of 1,200. The math is cruel, but it works. 2 years later, you will realize this was the easiest part. The first rule of the machine is simple. Volume is the only weapon for the invisible. You do not need 1,000 yeses. You only need 1 gate left unlocked. Networking at this level is not about prestige. It is about surviving the statistics. You must play the game of frequency. Proximity to power starts with a single coffee cup. 2 years later, the noise of the cold outreach has faded. You are no longer shouting into a digital void. You are a senior associate now. You have traded your cramped Queens apartment for a glass studio in Hudson Yards. Your suit fits better. Your watch costs more than your first car did. But you realize something critical about the American dream. Hard work is just the entry fee. It is never the winning bid. You have reached the ceiling of effort. Now you need the leverage of proximity. The invitation arrives on heavy cream cardstock. It is not a calendar invite. It is a physical object delivered to your desk. A private dinner at the Yale Club on Vanderbilt Avenue. You did not go to Yale. You went to a state school with a solid reputation and a library that smelled like damp paper. But the managing director you saved on the last tech merger is a legacy member. He put your name on the guest list. This is leveraged trust. You are entering the room on his reputation. You are a guest of the system. You walk through the mahogany doors. The air inside smells like old money and very expensive scotch. The room is filled with the Phi Beta Kappa elite. These are the alumni networks that quietly run the East Coast financial corridor. Every person here has a specific shorthand. They speak in codes of shared summers and secret societies. You are the only one who had to study the language. They were born speaking it. You realize that out here, a single referral is worth more than a decade of raw data. The third rule of the machine is that access is not earned. It is granted. In the United States, these closed loops control the flow of nearly 40% of all private equity assets. They are a self-sustaining ecosystem. If you are not in the loop, you are a service provider. If you are in the loop, you are a partner. You watch a deal get sketched on a linen napkin. It is worth $200 million. No one asks for a pitch deck. They only ask for a recommendation from someone they already know. You spend the night listening. You do not talk about your IRR models. You talk about their interests. You realize that at this level, networking is no longer about what you can do for a firm. It is about who will vouch for you when the doors are locked. You leave the club at midnight. The city looks different. You are no longer looking at the buildings as obstacles. You are looking at them as your new backyard. You are finally inside the perimeter. At the director level, the Yale Club starts to feel like a tourist trap. You are no longer satisfied with proximity. You want the architecture of power itself. You are invited to a weekend in the Hamptons. This is not a beach party. It is a vetting process. You arrive at a gated estate in Sagaponack. There are only 8 people here. 4 of them are CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. 1 is a former Treasury Secretary. You are the youngest person by 20 years. Your suit is custom. Your heart rate is high. You brought a 200-page pitch deck. You have analyzed every IRR and mezzanine debt structure for the acquisition. You wait for the moment to present. It never comes. Instead, you spend 4 hours discussing the history of PACs and political lobbying over a dinner of Wagyu and rare wine. They aren't looking at your numbers. They are looking at your loyalty. They are testing your discretion. The American corporate hierarchy is a series of concentric circles. At this level, the gatekeepers don't hire employees. They choose successors. Then you lose one, not because of the numbers. Your model was perfect. Your analysis was flawless. But you spoke too much at lunch. You revealed a detail about a competitor that was meant to stay in the room. The air in the mansion turns cold. You aren't fired. You are simply never invited back. You realize that information is not just leverage. It is a liability. The inner circle is built on the silence of its members. You learn to speak in riddles. You learn to listen for the unsaid. The fourth rule is simple. Capital follows trust, not just returns. In the United States, secret business societies and elite hunting clubs have shaped the economy for a century. They operate in the shadows of public filings. They determine who gets the capital and who gets the audit. You see a billion-dollar merger agreed upon with a simple nod across a fireplace. No contracts, no lawyers, just the handshake of the invisible. Equity stakes are traded like baseball cards between friends. You have entered the layer of the sovereign. The logic of the market no longer applies to you. You are now part of the machinery that sets the rules. You look at your phone. You have 3 missed calls from your old managing director. You don't call him back. You are no longer his protege. You are his peer. You are finally a gatekeeper. 10 years later, you are no longer a director. You are a managing partner at a sovereign-linked private equity fund. You don't fly commercial out of JFK. You take a Gulfstream GC750 from Teterboro to Zurich. The flight is silent. You don't work on pitch decks. You read classified dossiers on emerging market prime ministers. You have moved beyond the noise and the gatekeepers. You are now a market maker. You are the architect of the invisible. The helicopter from Zurich Airport to the mountains of Davos takes 20 minutes. You look down at the snow-covered Alps from the cabin. Below you, the world is moving in slow motion. People are working, consuming, and hoping for a better tomorrow. You are above the weather. You land at the private helipad, and a black Audi 8 waits with the engine running. The town is a fortress. 10,000 Swiss soldiers are stationed in the hills to protect you. They are not there to stop enemies. They are there to maintain the distance between you and the reality of the people below. You check into the Belvedere Hotel. You stand on the balcony with a glass of sparkling water. You look down at the protesters in the street far below. They are holding signs about climate change and corporate greed. To you, they are just data points in a macro risk model. They are the social cost variable in your next 10-year strategic plan. You feel nothing. No anger, no sympathy. Just the cold recognition that they are outside the loop. They don't know that the most important decisions have already been made in the private suites upstairs. The seating charts at the World Economic Forum are the real source of truth. You check your placement for the private dinner. You are sitting between the CEO of a Tier 1 defense contractor and the governor of a major central bank. This is the ultimate informational leverage. You aren't here to pitch a fund. You are here to coordinate the global financial architecture. You watch as a sovereign wealth fund manager from the Middle East shakes hands with a Silicon Valley titan. They are carving up the next generation of global infrastructure on a digital tablet. The fifth rule is the final one. Sovereignty is the absence of competition. At the Davos Circle, you realize that networking is no longer about connection. It is about alignment. You align your capital with the interests of the state. You align your influence with the goals of the system. You are no longer an individual with a career. You are a component of the global operating system. You look at your reflection in the darkened window. You don't recognize the hungry kid from the Queen's apartment. You realize that the highest level of networking is being the person people don't even know they need to reach. You are the invisible hand that moves the market. You are the sovereign. The machine takes another step forward. You're 71 years old. You're the chairman emeritus of a firm that manages more assets than the GDP of most European nations. Your office sits on the 80th floor of a glass spire in Lower Manhattan. The city below is nothing but a grid of glowing circuits and flowing capital. From this height, the individual human being is an abstraction. The sounds of the subway and the sirens of the street do not reach this altitude. You exist in a vacuum of absolute silence and climate-controlled precision. You are no longer a person. You are a node in the global infrastructure. You are the system itself. You have spent 4 decades climbing a ladder that has no end. Your wealth is no longer a number. It is a form of gravity. It pulls markets toward you. It dictates the fate of nations. You are the architect of the invisible.